Hey warriors, today inside the Next.js app using the app folder, we are going to implement tRPC and Prisma to create user endpoints. First thing we are going to do is to create our fresh Next.js app. So we are going to call it tRPC Prisma, and we are going to use TypeScript, of course. We are going to use ESLint, Tailwind CSS. We are not going to use the source directory, and we are going to use app router. So why is this important? It's because all other tutorials that you can find online, I mean most of them, are not for the app router, but for the old version of Next.js with the sources directory. So now we started our project, and now we can just go pm dev, and it is going to run here on our localhost 3000. Now I'm going to open my project in the VS Code. Here it is on the other screen, and we can start with the tRPC initialization. First thing we need is dependencies for tRPC, so I'm going to go to the documentation for Next.js. Here we have in the beginning, we can just copy and paste this command. I'm using pnpm, you can use whatever you like from here, and I'm going to go to my folder tRPC and paste those dependencies. So here we are installing the tRPC dependencies. We are installing the React query, which is used by tRPC, and also Zod for type safety. So now we can actually initialize tRPC inside our project. So what am I going to do is to create a server folder in the root of our project, and there I'm going to create the trpc.ts file. In this file we are going to initialize our trpc, so we are going to call trpc equals init trpc. That one is coming from the dependency, and we are going to put create. So from here we are going to export our router, which is going to be trpc.router, and also we are going to export our procedure. That one is trpc.procedure, like this. And that one is enough. So this file initialized our trpc. We need to create now the app router. So I'm going to create index.ts file inside the server folder, and there we are going to export constant app router, which is going to be our, it should be router, not route. Shift happens, where it is, here. And that one is just going to call the function like this. And inside our router now, we need to create routes. Those routes should look something like this. So we can create get users route, and that one is going to use procedure that we also created in our trpc file here. And from there, we can call the query, and that one is going to be an array function. And here we can just put return something, empty array for now, or we can mock some objects. It can be name Golmar and race orc. We can create one more. Let's make it Grom. And this route now is returning our mocked users. And we just need to export type app router, which is equal to type of app router, like this, for further usage. Let's now create the add user method. So how are we going to do that is we're going to add here add user endpoint, and here we're also going to use procedure, but this time we're going to use input. And this is now where the Zod types come in. So here we are going to use Zod, and it is going to be type of object, because we have name and race, so this one is an object, And inside, we're going to put name. That one is going to be Zod type of string like this, and race, that is going to be type string also. And that one we're not going to call query, we're going to call mutation. And let me just bring it down one line so it's easier to follow. So in the mutation, we have our opts, which we are going to use, and inside now we can get our input from those opts, and now we can call here, we are going to add that one from Prisma, call Prisma add user method. Basically what we have here inside the input, you can see that we have name string and race string, and everything is pretty much clear from the Zod types, and we always know what to expect. And that's the main difference here between the REST API and the tRPC. And how cool is that, warriors? And one more tip before we start creating our provider is that here, when you have a bunch of endpoints, it can easily become something like this, and we don't want this to happen. So what we can do is we can copy this whole file, and I didn't delete this one. We can copy whole file. We're going to create a new folder inside our server folder and call it routers. And inside, we're going to create user.ts. Inside user, we can paste everything except this part, and here we're going to call it user router. And this tRPC is one step behind. So now we have our router, and everything we gotta do is go to index, and here, instead of everything, just put the user router. It is not providing me the path, but I'm going to write it myself. So import user router from, that's the routers and user. So that one should be good. We don't need Zod anymore here. We don't need the procedure because everything is in the router. And now when we add something like posts or whatever we have, we are going to put it inside the routers folder, and here we can just add multiple routers in here. Now we need to create the handler for our actual API URL. So I'm going to create the API folder inside the app. Inside, I'm going to create the tRPC folder, and inside the tRPC, another folder which is going to be the dynamic route. So I will use square brackets for creating the dynamic route, and inside route.ts. Here we need to create our handler function. So that one is going to have request, type of request, and inside we are going to call fetch request handler by tRPC, and there we are going to put our endpoint. So this one is going to be API/tRPC, which we created here by this folder. Next thing we need is a router, which is going to be app router from our server folder. Then we need this request, and finally we need the create context, which is just going to be the array function like this. And that should be it. Now finally we need to export our handler as get, and we need to export it as post also. Now we can create our provider. So for our provider, we are going to need the client. I'm going to create client also in the server folder. So this file is going to be our communication between the client and the server through React query. So here we are going to create tRPC constant, which is going to use create tRPC React, this one. And it is going to be type of app router, which we have in this folder, in the server folder, and it is just going to be an empty object. Now we can actually create our provider. So I'm going to create new folder, components, inside our root directory, and inside I'm going to create a new component and call it provider.tsx. I'm going to use React snippets to create the functional component, and there it is, our provider. This one is basically going to be the implementation of React query. So we are going to put the state, which is going to be called query client, and that one is going to use state, and inside we are going to call the new query client by, why is it not there? It should be by React query. So import query client from 10 stack React query, yes, this one. And also, yeah, this one is going to be the client component because we are using the use state hook. Here we are just going to pass an empty object, and now we need to create our tRPC client, and that one is also going to be a state. And there we are going to use the tRPC that we just created in the client file, and we are going to create a client, and inside that client we need links. That is going to be an array, and inside we need HTTP batch link. And our link is going to be the URL HTTP localhost port 3000/API/tRPC. And now here we need to return our provider. So that one is tRPC.provider, and those are tags. So in the first one we are going to use client. That one is going to be our tRPC client, this one, and query client, which is going to be our query client from here. And inside we are going to call our query client provider like this, which is going to use the query client as a client, and inside we need children. So that one we need to set here as a prop. So we are going to have children, and that type is going to be like this, react.node, I think. Yes. And now this is our provider, which we can use. So now we can actually test our API. Let's close everything and go to our page. Here I'm going to delete everything that is by default here and also this minimum screen by Next.js. Also I'm going to go to the CSS and remove everything except the tailwind, and here I'll remove this image. And look how easy it is now to call our API. So we are going to create getUsers constant, and we are going to call tRPC client, and from there we can already see we have a user router. We are just going to change that a little bit. It's better practice to have it like this, user, and now we can call here user, and we have everything served. We know there is the addUser method and getUsers method. So we are going to call getUsers. Now when we press dot, we already know that it's a query. It's not giving us mutations or something like that. And we called it. So now next thing that we would do is to just use JSON stringify and call that constant getUsers.data. Now we can go and see, and yes, here it is. We have our users coming through the API. So now if we change something here, let me make this maybe better for you to see it like this. So if we here go into our user router and we add something else here, we put that this one is elf and we refresh, then our API is returning different type of data. How cool is that? So next step for us would be to initialize Prisma to create our database for our users, and then to actually get users here from our database, and here to add the user to database so we can fill in all the users and get them like this here. Let's start doing that. So let's go to Prisma documentation. There we are going to go to get started and the quick start. So from here, as we see, we need to install the Prisma as a dev dependency. So let's add it here. We're going to add with a big D our Prisma. And that one is done. Then what's next? We need to run this command to initialize everything and to create with the SQLite. So let's do that. And that one is done. If we see here, we see that Prisma created a folder, and inside we have a new schema, which we are going to use to create our first table called users. So we can take that one also from here, this one. We can just copy paste it from the documentation of Prisma. We don't need posts. We are going to put name and also race. It doesn't need to be unique, but we need to have name and race in our case. If you check here in the schema file, we also have this environment database URL. That one is also added automatically by Prisma with that command. So here they're shooting the dev.db file inside our root directory. So what I love to do, it's maybe better practice to create that file here inside the Prisma directory. So I'm going to create dev.db, and here I'm going to shoot the Prisma/devdb. And now we can start our migration. So that's the third step that Prisma is recommending from their documentation. And now everything should be good. Yes, our migration is done. And here we can see here our migration for users. And now we can run the Prisma Studio to see that everything is working fine. So npx Prisma Studio, I think, is the command. Yes, here it is. We have our model users and currently it's empty. So let's fill it with some orcs. Now we can go to the quick guide again, and here we're going to need this part. So to import Prisma client, and we're going to do it into our user route. So here I'm going to import Prisma like this. And now instead of hard-coded orcs here, I'm going to return prisma.userModel and then find, no, it's fetch, find many, here it is. And that one is going to return all the users from our database. Currently, if we check here on our, let's close now everything, it's just an empty array because we don't have anything inside our database yet. We need this add user finished, so we're going to await Prisma. Oh, we cannot await, it's not a sync function. Also here we need to await actually that call from the database, so both routes should be async. So here Prisma user create, and inside create we need data, and inside the data we have name, which is going to be our input, this one dot name, and we need race, which is going to be input dot dot race, like this. We are going to remove this to do, and this one should work. To test it out, we are going to create inputs. I'm just going to create quickly the input name and input race and the button add. Let's create that one quickly. Let's go to our page, and here we are going to create add user. That one is going to use add user from our router, and here instead of use query, we are going to use mutation. And now we just need simple inputs. I'm just going to create a div. Here I'm going to put inputs and the other one, and the first one is going to be name, the other one is going to be race, and we can just put it to be a little bit nice, maybe flex column and gap of, I don't know, 3. And our inputs are invisible from, okay, they're not invisible, but they need just a little bit of borders. And this one also, class name. Okay, it's not very beautiful, but we can use it. And also here we're going to create a button add. Great. Let's just put border that there also. It annoys me. Okay, perfect. Design is really beautiful. So just quickly, we need our states. So first one is going to be the name and set name. That one is going to use state by React. It's going to be a string and it's going to be empty in the beginning. Second one is going to be email and set email. So we need to set it here on change that this one is going to, we need the event. So we're going to set the name to be our event.target.value. And there, of course, we need actual value to be name. Same thing for the email here, except it is going to be email and set email. Nice. And now the final touch is here on click. We are going to call add user dot, this is the important part, mutate, and inside we are going to put our name and our race. Those are states that we are going to use. What I placed here? Oh, I placed email from some reason. Okay, it's not email, it's set race, and email is actually race. I know why I used email. I always use emails for users. Okay, so now we have our user mutate function ready when we press add. So let's try it out. We have our name, Golmar, our race is going to be orc. Say good luck, click. Okay, so this is expected. I think it is in the database, but because we didn't refresh, it is still not visible here. Now when I refresh, it's there. Magic. I love tRPC. So let's handle that case also. When we add new user, it should be instantly added. So here in the use mutation, we are going to pass an object, and inside we have onSettled, which we are going to call as a function, and inside we are just going to call getUsers.refetch. So on each added new user, we are going to refetch users again. So now if we add old buddy Grom, which is also an orc, and we click add, it is going to be instantly added into our database. And if we check again in our Prisma Studio, I close the tab, here it is, we can see also here that we added our orcs and everything is working fine and it is in the database. And really important thing here, warriors, is when you come here and call this get users and add user, also we should rename this to get and to add, but okay. So here, if we check, you see that we already know what is the output of this API route. And we wouldn't know this if it was any other REST server API. But with the tRPC, we know. Also, when you see the add user, we see the same thing. So we know exactly what to expect. And if we would do something like this here, if we wouldn't add the race, it would complain because it would say that race is missing. So that's why tRPC is this good. I hope you enjoyed, warriors, diving deep into the tRPC and Prisma implementation. It's really cool what we can do now inside Next.js app. If you'd like more guides like this, subscribe.